we know this is a busy time, and we want to make sure that the fact that everyone is joining us, we very much appreciated. I wanted to start off to remind everyone in the session that nabs is here for you. It's your industry charity. Our reason for being is supporting professionals in this business. Whether you have heard of nabs or are hearing about us for the first time today, I encourage you to go to our website at nabs.org to learn more. Also follow us on social so you can get all the latest news on programs and services that we're continuously rolling out to support people in this community. So there's two stats that I want to leave you with to set the stage for this conversation. The first, a key finding from a recent comprehensive mental health index report prepared by our partners at Morneau Chappelle, entitled Mental Health 1 Year into the COVID-19 Pandemic, found that more than 2/3 of people surveyed reported having at least some concern about their mental health, with more than 12% saying they're not sure that they'll be able to cope or are in crisis. And secondly, at nabs, it's more than just the news that we see in the marketplace. We also see it in our client data, with one particular data point that really stands out to me. Industry professionals that reach out for counseling support are more than twice as likely to be dealing with moderate or severe anxiety than the national average. So now to the panel discussion, why we're all here. Burnout. We've read article after article, seen survey results, research studies, we get it. There's a burnout problem in this business. But what as an industry are we actually doing about it? And let's be clear that we know this is not just an outcome of the pandemic, this is something that the industry has been dealing with for years. We have with us today, Claire Jones, who will moderate the discussion. Not only is Claire the Senior Vice President of Operations at MIQ, she's also a very vocal advocate for mental health, sits on several CAMH working groups to bring practical, and the key here is actionable policies back into her business and the industry at large to build a better way of doing business moving forward. She's also a member of the NAB Central Committee team that is bringing these sessions to this community this year. And with all the spare time she has, she's studying a master's in psychology and neuroscience. We also have Lisa Twastiak joining us today. Beyond being a senior account manager at Spotify, she also leads the organization's Hearts and Soul Initiative in North America, which at its core is designed to support employees' mental health throughout the year, not just on one day or in 1 month. It's a further attempt to foster a culture of awareness, acceptance, sensitivity, and very importantly, support around mental health issues, creating a culture where we can embrace our identities. And I love this next part, look after ourselves and each other, thrive, and be our best. Then of course, Kat Wiles, who is a huge proponent of mental health and has been very publicly vocal about the changes that we need to make to better support our own mental health, as well as that of our colleagues. Kat most recently helped nabs launch the Crumbles campaign, which is our biggest campaign ever. And has been participating in sessions just like this one internally at COSET to enact organizational change there. And last but not least, Boris Cho, who is the Senior Director of Strategy at Midas, also key NABS Central Committee member, a NABS National Board member. And if you follow Boris on LinkedIn, you know I could go on, but really more importantly, a great person that walks the talk and advocates for change, whether that be in his business or the industry at large. And also a reminder that after a panel discussion, we will close with a presentation by Leanne Wensbroe that will provide us with some practical tips on addressing burnout. So Claire, the floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, just some quick housekeeping before we get stuck in. If you would like to chatter away, please feel free to do so through the chat functionality at the bottom. We love some good chatter in these conversations. If you have any questions that you want to direct at any of our panelists, please also pop them in the Q&A section. We'll try and get to them throughout where it makes sense, but if not, we will carve out some time at the end so we can get to those questions. So I'm going to cut to the chase. So let's get stuck in for the next 40 minutes. And I'm going to kick us off actually with another stat. and one that was recently reported in Forbes magazine. And it actually outlined that 83% of marketing and communication professionals are experiencing burnout, which I think we can all agree is alarmingly high, but sadly not surprising. So given the different perspectives that we have here on the panel today, I would actually love to understand from each of you why you think burnout is so prominent across our sector, and actually the characteristics of our industry you feel make us particularly vulnerable to burnout. So I'm going to throw that one to Lisa first.
All right, I'll unmute myself there. You know, I definitely think there are obviously a lot of factors that contribute to this. I would say if you look at our industry, it is an incredibly fast-paced industry, right? There is constant change, and we're always working to consistently adapt to that. With that, you know, thinking in a really tactical way, you know, reflecting on this, you know, there's so much that happens in really short, condensed timelines, like, you know, urgent needs we need to meet. Yet most of our businesses are structured as a 9 to 5, right? So that means we're constantly pushing and our resources and teams to be able to manage things that are almost require 24-hour management sometimes, kind of within this limited model that is, of course, growing and changing. The second thing I think is that it is really, you know, in this industry more than any others, it's kind of difficult to have boundaries. One, we're digital, so we are connected all the time. But we're also all encouraged to participate with digital. That means participating with social and social media and being out there and putting our lives out there. And the work tends to blend really quickly with personal. And if you don't take that time for yourself, without that ability to disconnect, take that time for yourself, it's very easy to just feel like it is all work all the time. And that would overwhelm anybody in any industry.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Boris, I heard you cough up there.
Thanks, Claire. So for me, I do believe, like, you know, burnout is increasingly common in our industry because we're always chasing deadlines. Like Lisa mentioned, we work in a very fast-paced environment, and it's pretty apparent because, like, we as colleagues can recognize when our peers are burning out, right? And in our industry, it's commonly joked about. There's jokes and memes all about burnout in our industry, so it's there. I just don't think we're doing enough as a collective to try to help improve the industry by giving people more flexibility. And yeah, definitely a problem we need to tackle.
Yeah, agreed. Kat, what's your perspective?
Well, I think, like, our industry has long been a breeding ground for perfectionism. And I think I think that everyone's nodding. So I think that as well, you know, perfectionism doesn't respect boundaries, and perfectionism is really, really unreasonable. And I'm talking about, like, the voice that we all have in our head. And I'm suspecting that we've got a higher index of people who have got a perfectionism, which therefore means that the partner to the perfectionist is the inner critic. So I would, you know, hazard a guess that a lot of us have got quite, you know, do we all speak to ourselves in the way that we would speak to a friend? And look, I'm working on that, right? So I'm a work in progress on that. But I think that is, you know, really a big thing that we need to recognize, that, you know, what are the behaviors that we're rewarding, breeding within our industry? And, you know, that's you know, if we're not creating our own boundaries for ourselves, and unfortunately this stuff has to start with ourselves, because, you know, it's that old adage of, like, putting your own oxygen mask on first, and then you can help others. Because if you just, you know, you don't, and you keep giving to others, then you're going to break as well, and that doesn't help anyone. But I think that what I would also say is there's what I would talk about as a dangerous nostalgia that I think exists within agencies, which I hear a lot. And I hear people saying, oh, remember that pitch where we all worked all night? And, you know, that sort of, those behaviors that are celebrated, where there's that kind of celebrating and revering grind culture. And I think, you know, we really need to watch the behaviors that we're rewarding at agencies, because otherwise we're making long hours, you know, a high praise of behavior and making that, you know, a high status behavior. And quite honestly, that really isn't healthy, and that doesn't, you know, that isn't an attractive place of work in the 21st century.
No, it's also not sustainable, right?
No.
Absolutely not. So I think on that point as well, I think it leads quite nicely into the next question around like just how our industry is structured. Right, so I know we've had some kind of side chats about this prior to this, and it's like, you know, fundamentally in our industry, like how we're engineered and how we're built from agencies, how we manage clients, like, you know, there's a lot to be done there in managing this. So I'd love to understand again from each of your perspectives, knowing you each sit within different parts of the sector. How do you see like the structure of our industry contributing to burnout? Boris, I'll kick that one to you first, actually.
Well, you know, I think Kat made a good point there about us marketers being trying to be perfection, like try to perfect the work model, and I think we need to just change our attitude. You know, sort of, we need to change the way we think about how we work in today's world, right? Things are a lot different now, and where more people are experiencing burnout more than ever. And I don't think that this pandemic has helped us at all. What was the question again, Claire?
Sorry, 2 seconds. So it was around just the structure of our industry, essentially. You know, I think one of the things we know is that, see, we're all at different parts of the daisy chain, I would call it. Client asks for something, goes to the agency, goes to a vendor, goes to a partner, and there's always that kind of ripple on effect of kind of where, you know, where does that stop and where does that start? So again, we'd love your perspective on that from an agency standpoint on the media side.
Yeah, from the media perspective, I think we just need to manage expectations and check in on each other a lot more often. Not only our peers and colleagues, but also our media partners and our clients as well. Because we're all trying to work at the same pace, right? But in every step, everyone's trying to hit that acceleration button, and that's not doing anybody like who has to take on the project any service. So really managing the expectation.
Yeah. Kat, I'd love your perspective on this as well. I know you have some strong opinions on this one.
I'm not surprised as you get to know I've got strong opinions on everything.
Love it. What we're here for.
So I'd probably say, in a way, yes, it's a bit about how we structure ourselves, but I'd almost say it's bigger than that. It's about the fundamental behaviours that we're exhibiting within organisations. So I'd say, can we please just start freeing up ourselves from like the tyranny of busy work? You know, I just think like all those like meetings about meetings, which earn up, you know, you like look at your diary and it's like the meeting about the meeting for the meeting. Like, I don't know, like clients, if you realize how much like agencies do this in terms of, well, we need to have a meeting before the meeting about the meeting. And, you know, you're kind of burning through all of these hours with like busy work. And, you know, we've got to start like doubling down and like focusing on the right things. And, you know, not if a client asks for something on a Friday afternoon for Monday 9 a.m, what's, you know, just asking the question, like, what's driving that request? What's the meeting? You know, and you know, we all have like, it's okay when it's an exception or an anomaly, but I think when that starts becoming the rule, then I think, you know, that becomes how we work. And again, sound like a broken record, but it's like coming back to boundaries and us not only asserting them individually, but also as businesses. And I think that, you know, are we talking enough as agencies? I'm sort of asking myself as well this at the same time about how we're truly building, you know, a mentally healthy workforce and how we're, you know, supporting our employees in the ways that we work, and what are our kind of, you know, contracts that we have with each other about the culture of the organizations where we work, and how we show up and how we support each other, which is, you know, what Boris is saying, like, you know, how can we come together to truly support each other? And all of that stuff starts with culture. And then I think if you have the culture in place, the structure and the systems and everything should come from that.
There's a really good question in here, actually. Thank you, Tom. Is part of our structural issue in the agency world driven in large part by a top-down mentality within and never pushing back on clients who have unrealistic timelines?
Yes.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Yes.
Sorry,
and I think we should all be challenging that. But I mean, anyone who knows me, I'm a bit of an anarchist. So, you know, yeah, I think like, you know, yeah, let's challenge it. Like, you know, people power. Absolutely.
100%. Lisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, Kat. It's all of that is bang on. It starts with, I think, really understanding, even very tactically, understanding the timelines and process that everything requires. So when you have one, you know, something that comes down urgently, that request that comes down on a Friday, you know, when it comes down to your partners, think about the timelines that they have to turn things around as well. We just don't have, no company has the resources to consistently turn things around that are urgent. So we have to, you know, every company has to then figure out and triage like what is actually urgent, but more and more that definition of urgency is like a constant changing. It's constantly changing. And the more and more, you know, if we, to your point, if we don't push back, if we don't ask questions, if we also don't help create a sense of compassion in terms of understanding, hey, we're not saying no because X, we need X timeline to do this. Help us build this in upfront so that all of the partners can come to the table with their best work, right? And, you know, respecting the boundaries of each team involved in that process. You know, just want to comment too on something you said about the expectations that we create in teams. If all you're ever rewarding is that behavior of the people that are you know, taking the actions that we know through, you know, so much research is going to cause burnout, then what it also does is create an expectation that everybody else on the team has to work at that pace. And that's what they have to do to get ahead. So it truly has to come from the top down. And it's not enough to say it, it has to be modeled from the top down. And that is difficult and is going to require a lot of change and open lines of communication.
Yeah, massively. And then Pete as well from the GenWell project, thank you for your question here. Are agencies creating enough proactive connection points along the journey to create a supportive, empathetic and caring conversations that can drive more decisions that are aligned with the greater good of the agencies and its employees? It's a big question. Anyone want to take that? Boris, I think you're muted.
You know, I think especially over the last couple of years, organizations have been doing their best to provide resources to their people. You know, but I think that where the downfall is that I don't think organizations are really like surveying or getting feedback from their employees to really engage exactly what they need, right? So instead of assuming what your employees will need to combat burnout, I would suggest them actually asking, you know, the people on the floor doing the work, what is it that's burning you out, and what can we do as an organization to help alleviate that for you? I know there are a lot of organizations out there doing that, but I still think that we have a long way to go, and we still need to ask more questions and really get to the root of the problem. Is it long hours? Is it we're multitasking too much? Is it we're just constantly stressed out over deadlines? You know, is working from home creating a very stressful environment for people now that we've done it for so long? These are the questions I think that employers need to ask employees in order to really understand what resources they require to become available to them. But we're, you know, like I can speak on behalf of Group M, we have a lot of programs, we have a lot of resources that are being offered. We have a new EAP program. We, you know, we're surveying people and really building a culture of feedback So from a leadership perspective, I think at Group M, we're really trying to understand what, from an individual perspective, what triggers their burnout, right? And then we can sort of take that information back and try to create this new environment where people can manage that expectation, right? And have a place to say, raise their hand and ask for help. As an industry, I think we don't do that very well, raising our hand and asking for help. A lot of times I feel like we're trying to take on too much. And back again to the perfectionism piece, that's just, it's built in our DNA, right? And we just sort of need to change that attitude and realize like everything can't be perfect. And I need to be able to ask for help.
Yeah, agreed. Kat, did you want to add something to that? Sorry.
Yeah, I saw a lot like in the comments as well about like fear of retribution for like, you know, bringing up if you're struggling or you're finding challenged or asserting your boundaries. And I mean, I guess if you look up within the organization that you're in and there isn't anyone there that you think embodies empathy, consideration, you know, they're supportive and they actually care, then I'd say get the hell out of that organization, because there's no psychological safety there. And so, you know, I'm not saying that all agencies are going to be perfect and, you know, we're all trying and we're at different stages on the journey. But I think, you know, if you look up and you see at least one or two people who you could go to and you could have a proper conversation with. And I think if you're feeling like, you know, about the boundaries thing, I would like, I always like I've had some really great mentors. So like reaching out to mentors and people in other agencies, like friends, like, you know, hearing if they're going through some of the same challenges, because, you know, what do they do? What are their tips and tricks and what are their hacks and, you know, all these different things. And I think there is a hesitancy of agencies and actually the industry and probably, you know, organizations writ large to kind of really lean into this stuff, because I think they probably feel a bit of anxiety and nervousness about the fact that, you know, they're opening Pandora's box and they, you know, you don't know what's going to come out. But, you know, everybody who, you know, I don't know, you know, at the bottom of Pandora's box, after all of everything comes out, is of course hope. So I'd say like we need to open the box, work it through, and, you know, be building an environment that our people deserve and that we all deserve. And I think that's super important. And I think the other thing that I'd say is that I read something on, I don't know if any of you follow Farnham Street, is my favorite like email that I get on a Sunday night, and they've got a really good Instagram, and I think there's a responsibility as leaders as well. And there was this one thing that I read last week, which was the more insulated you are from the consequences of your decisions, the less likely you are to make good decisions. So I think as leaders, like we need to get in amongst it, we need to feel it, and we need to be alongside our people and feel the heartbeat of the agencies that we're in, so we know what the emotional well-being of our people is.
Yeah, fully endorse that. It kind of ties in. So I'm just keeping up. There's loads of chats and questions, so I'm trying to get them as quickly as I can. So apologies for the delay if I don't get to them. It ties in, I think, as well to the next part of the conversation that I do really want to focus on, being that you're all esteemed industry leaders. And to your point, Kat, like being in with your people and understanding what's happening starts with also modeling behaviors, right? And just really starting to understand, like, I'm pretty sure we've all been through issues of burnout throughout our careers, but how can we learn from that and model that? So I'd just love to know from anyone who's willing to share, has there been a time within your career where you've been overwhelmed, burned out, and how did you navigate that experience? And also, how did you ask for help as well? Did you even get help? I think these are the conversations that we do need to be a bit more candid about. Who would like to take that one first and share some personal experiences? Let's be brave.
You know, I'm happy to. I mean, yeah. There's been a few times, I'm not gonna lie, and I would like put my hands up that I really, I used to wear my perfectionism like a badge of honor, like coyly in an interview, like met a few decades ago. So what's your weakness? I think you went, oh, well, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. But actually, used to wear that as a badge of honor, and actually it is, really crippling. Because it tips onto it, because I think that I was one of those people that misunderstood perfectionism versus like high performance, and they're completely different things. But some of the times that I've been overwhelmed, it's been a few times, but actually the most profound time was when I had challenges outside of work as well. So when I was, going through a divorce or having a child, and I'll give you the worst time in my life. I'll go there to share it with you all, which is that when I found out that I was pregnant with my second child, I had literally just accepted a role as head of strategy at an agency in London. And that was like where I'd always been working towards, like, ever since I joined the industry. And I put myself under like so much pressure to exceed the expectations, to prove to everyone that I was as good as a man would have been in that role. So, I had this terrible fear of judgment and feeling that I need to prove everyone wrong. So I sort of went into like overdrive. And that's why I mentioned the perfectionism, because I was like, the standards that I had were like so ridiculously unreasonable. It was like, no, I can't just be the best that I can be. I want to be, better than the, better strategist, and shine more light and be more like, tap dance and jazz handy than the founder of the company that I was going to, who had got like 20 years more experience than me. That is like how unreasonable like my inner voice was being in my head. But of course, it's like, no, keep going, no, keep going. And actually, I had, I worked these grueling long hours, and this voice was like in absolute overdrive. And my baby came 7 weeks early. And, I mean, I sort of laugh at this because I've got like a dark sense of humor. I was trying to find like a, my waters are broken at work at 7:30 in the evening. I went to the, hospital just because I thought that I probably should just check it out. I mean, what sort of level was I in? And then sort of got there, and they were like, yeah, we need to keep you in. And it was the night actually that Donald Trump was being elected. So it's actually quite entertaining on the old phone. And the next morning they came in, and they were like 6:30 in the morning. Oh yeah, up to Labour ward. And I was like, sorry, why? And they were like, yeah, your baby's coming. And I was like, well, I've got to make a few calls because I need to like sort out a bit of freelance and stuff like that. And they're like looking at me, and they're like, trying to get me into scrubs and everything. I mean, so anyway, that was my frame of mind just before I had this emergency C-section. And so no surprise that then 6 weeks later, bang, the fuse went in my head and just completely broke. And I'm really, really bad at asking for help. Like, I'm a Capricorn nightmare, right? Capricorns don't ask for help. But that, that time I broke so badly, and I had, a preemie baby, and I just didn't have any choice but to ask for help. And so I ended up going to my friends, actually, an amazing friend that I got in the UK, came up and got me from North London, took me down to South London, and got me in to see a psychiatrist. And it was at the Priory in just outside of London. So anyone who's watched Ab Fab with Adina and Patsy, that's where I ended up. And it was 5:30 on a Monday evening, and I sat there, and it was awful. And it was almost like I was talking to the psychiatrist had asked me, so who are you? Like, and I was talking about myself, and there was this almost like out of body experience where I was observing who this person was that was talking, and who bore no resemblance to who I believed I was in my head. And I was sort of rambling on about myself, feeling very disconnected. And I just said, oh, well, I, don't even, to be honest, I don't even know if I'm depressed. And then the psychiatrist said, you're the most depressed person that I've seen all day. And I was like, well, at least I'm still good at something. So, I mean, that's like, and then it was like, honestly, after I have to make a joke about it, right? And then that's just like my personality, like how I deal with things. But then, you know, I did a huge amount of work to get myself better. And I was meant to go back to work after 4 months because, you know, actually I started the job when I was pregnant, baby came early. I didn't get pay at all on my maternity leave. So I had to remortgage my house, take some money out to pay my own salary, to pay for all the psychology and psychiatrists, like pay for all of that stuff. I recognized that I'm speaking from a position of great privilege, that I owned a property and I was able to release some equity. But I share that with you. You know, I was meant to go back to work because I couldn't actually afford to be off after 4 months. And I was so ill, I had to be off for 10 months. And so that was so I've rambled a bit, haven't I? But that was like my probably most profound moment where I broke.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you definitely won't be doing at all. Thank you for that. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So my moment when I would say these last couple of years have probably been the hardest for me. I went through a divorce. I went through a major serious medical surgery where I had my left eye replaced with a prosthetic, all while navigating the pandemic. And trying to balance work life and everything, right? So I think Cap made a really good point that our personal life challenges contribute to our burnout, right? We can't be at our best if we're not at our best, right? So for me, it was about creating a support group that comprised of family, friends, and work. And surprisingly, work came through. They were incredibly supportive, and I believe that they wouldn't have been unless I hadn't put my hand up and said, hey guys, listen, I'm struggling a bit here. I've had a really tough couple of years where I heard the word no a lot, right? And I wasn't so used to hearing no all the time. And for me, it was eye-opening because if you take Boris out of like the environment that he's so accustomed to, he becomes a different person, right? And that's how I felt once the pandemic had started. I kind of was scrambling at home, trying to keep myself busy, trying to figure out what's my day-to-day going to look like. All at the same time, I have a young 6-year-old I got to take care of. They're still recovering from surgery, going through this divorce process. It was a lot to take on. But being openly candid and honest with my support group, I was able to persevere through a lot of it. It's still going through a lot of challenges today, but I'm in a lot better place I am now than I would say I was 2 years ago, solely based on the fact that I put my hand up and I acknowledged, listen, I'm not at my best. I need help. And in the last probably 12 months, I've had so much support from Group M, leaders across the organization, not even leaders, just the people across the organization checking in on me on a regular basis. And that sort of gave me that extra energy to, ask for more help if I needed it and not be so ashamed about what was going on in my life. So I understood that everyone's going through something, right? But we're not going to get the help unless we ask for it, right? And that takes courage and bravery. It took a lot for me to just say, hey, listen, I'm struggling, but I'm glad I did. So my advice to anybody on today's call, if you are struggling, put your hand up, ask for help. There's no shame in it. No one's going to look at you differently. You'd be surprised at how much love and care there is in our industry. If you just got to look for it.
Yeah, echo that 100%. Lisa, was there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up on our last question? I want to make sure you get yours in as well.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. I think having been in this industry for, 16 years now, in those early days, like people weren't talking about burnout, right? And we were just moving full tilt as fast as possible. And were we overwhelmed? Like, I've gone through definitely different periods where in retrospect, I was 100% overwhelmed, but there wasn't a team to be able to, pass work to, and there weren't these open conversations about it. So you just kept going. And I'm not wearing that as a badge of honor. I'm saying that contributes, because there's a certain point where it builds and it builds and it builds. And eventually the way that it started to manifest in sort of the latter half of my career was physical illness. Suddenly out of nowhere, I was getting sick all of the time, no matter what I did. And like, it was really manifesting as like flu. Like, I was physically couldn't get out of bed some days, and I didn't understand, because I thought I was doing doing yoga and all these things to help. It, thankfully, again, I didn't know what to call it, but thankfully, as I do now, I had a boss that I could just have an open conversation with and say, like, hey, there are these other deeply personal, there's people around me that are sick, that are close to me, and personal things that are happening. And to hear him get emotional openly with me and like signify that it's okay. Leaders of the organization create a sense of, Kat, you made reference to this, psychological safety. You can't encourage other people to be open if you're not going to be open first, right? And so just that, and having that kind of dialogue enabled me to go and get the professional support that I needed. And I think there's something else important I would emphasize. It's not just support, it's also proper diagnosis, right? So getting the diagnosis you need to get the proper treatment you need. And it's not just you're going to wake up and it's going to go away overnight. It takes work, deep, uncomfortable, consistent work. That, in combination with also recognizing some of the habits that are not great in this industry, like the not sleeping, how much we socialize, alcohol, all of those things, stepping back, accepting that some of those things were maybe not so healthy coping mechanisms, and letting some of those things go. Sleep, deeply underrated, very underrated. That was a huge factor, I think. And also something else that I found really helpful was a sense of purpose outside of work. It is so easy to say no to everything, skip that class, not do that hangout, skip that dinner because you have so much work. It's never going to stop. It's always going to be there. But if you don't find that outside activity, something else that gives you joy and focus and meaning, puts you in a flow state, takes you out of the stress of worrying and thinking about work for a bit, it actually improves your productivity when you're at work. Whatever that is to you, any class, etc., those things made a huge difference. Spending time with my husband, my family, always prioritizing that the way that I would prioritize a client meeting. Those things made a huge difference. And I think last, it was owning the things I was good at and accepting the things that I was not, and having that open dialogue with my team. Because I think we all sometimes expect everybody to fit in this type of box of everybody must be X to be considered a superstar. That's just not reality. And when you're force fitting yourself to do activities and try to be perfect with things that aren't your skill set, it's just going to cause burnout, because you're working 10 times harder to do what is super easy to somebody else. So that collaborative recognition, and again, that came from being in an environment that created a sense of safety where I could admit those things and have that dialogue. But all of those things have become, hugely important to being able to, turn around both my physical and mental health and just function better.
Yeah. Thank you so much all for sharing that. So we've actually tanked through these questions and we've still got loads to go and we've run out of time. But I think to start, because I want to make sure that we do have the bit at the end for some more practical tips around burnout following on from the stories just shared. But I think actually the reality is that not all organizations or leaders in our industry give a shit about this stuff, like the people on this call right now. And that's a problem. So I think I've noticed some of the comments that are coming through on the chat and the Q&A, and we will follow up with those after, by the way. There's, again, that sense of fear, I'm not entirely sure my leader necessarily advocates for this. I don't feel safe to do that. And I think actually one of the comments around the right to turn off and log off initiative, which is very near and dear to Kat's heart, I know. I think this is an industry-wide problem. Right. And I think starting to have these conversations, we need to fix some of this from leaders down. So I think following on from that conversation on that right to turn off and log off, I think is going to be critical here, so that we're all on the same page. So I'm going to wrap up now. I'm going to pass back over to Mark to set the scene for our last part of today. Thank you so much to our panelists as well for sharing.
Yes, thank you so much, Claire, Lisa, Kat, and Boris. Very much appreciated. Appreciate your candor and for sharing. Very powerful stuff. It's now my pleasure to introduce Leanne Wensbroe, who will help us action on some of the points that were discussed today. Build the foundation to improve the mental health of ourselves and our teams moving forward. Leanne helps professionals who feel stuck level up their mindset so they can move forward and have the career, relationships, and health they want. She's a certified high performance coach based in Toronto. She works with clients around the world. She has background in clinical nutrition, nutritional genomics, and corporate wellness. She's also a functional medicine certified health coach. Leanne, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So from my perspective, as a performance coach, really to address burnout, we really need to dive into mindset, which is how we think, because it's really our thinking that's driving our choices to run down our finite resources of time, energy, and focus, right? So the real power is understanding what's really behind the choices that we're making. And that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. So I am very, very happy to be here today with you. Like many of you, I've come pretty close to hitting that brick wall of burnout myself too. And as Mark mentioned, before I became a performance coach, I was a nutritionist in a clinical practice. And it was a pretty stressful work environment. The leadership was very old school. So it was more like leading by intimidation. There wasn't a lot of psychological safety there. It felt very tense a lot of the time. And then at home, as a wife and a mom, I had 2 kids, and I just felt, constantly tired. And if I really think back to that time, there's a night that always stands out in my mind where it just really crashed over me, just how wrong it was, like the way that I was living my life. So it had just been a regular day and, work, stress, whatever, home, dinner, clean up the kitchen, kids into bed, that whole thing. And now it's 11 o'clock at night and everybody else in my house is asleep, but I'm still up because I'm downstairs in the kitchen. And the next day I had to make, a snack or provide a snack for my son's kindergarten class. And so I was getting set to make homemade banana bread. And as a nutritionist, I had a really high standard for myself. I mean, it was like, I want to walk my talk, and I would never want to be seen, not even by myself, but of course not by other people, as not walking my talk. So that's why this banana bread could not be store-bought. It had to be homemade. And I just remember feeling this huge wash of anger, kind of come over me. And it wasn't really the banana bread. It was just, that was the most tangible thing in front of me that was really representative of like a much larger problem in my life, right? So it was like every day I had that list of things that I had to do. Everything required my energy all the time, it felt like. And I was always the one, right? Always the person who says yes, always the person stepping up, always the person planning and doing everything. And I think that that's really how the burnout started to creep up, for me in my life. And I just remember thinking that night, this is so crazy because I have so many good things in my life, right? I have my kids, my husband, I have a nice house, like, all the stuff, but I am so tired and grumpy all the time that I'm not really enjoying any of it. So I was really fortunate that, right around that time, I happened to be listening to a podcast and I heard a high performance coach talking about mindset. And I really didn't know what that was, but I was very intrigued by the idea that there was these strategies I could use that, could help me get control over my life and maybe, start to feel happier and more fulfilled. And I think, that got me through the door for coaching. And as I began to unpack mindset, I really came to understand that performance is 90% mental. So the brain's always back there running the show for us. And we all have a belief system that resides in the subconscious part of our brain. And it's really governing all the decisions that we're making. And the research in this area actually shows that around 95% of our behavior is actually being run by this autopilot part of our brain. So we think we're in control over our lives, but actually the larger part of what's driving our behavior is hidden from our view. So a big part of my autopilot, which I didn't really know was impacting me behind the scenes there, was the mindset of a high achiever, which runs the biggest risk of hitting that brick wall of burnout because it runs on deficit mindset strategies. And I'm going to explain what that is. And also, how we can re-architect our mindset with the mindset of a high performer, which is what really helps set us up to make those high quality decisions that actually lead us into peak performance. So I think, like, for your listeners, first, let's just get into alignment here with what burnout is. So it's the physical, the mental, and the emotional wear and tear of chronic stress. And chronic is really the key word here. Okay, in the animal kingdom, stress is acute, right? Like, there's a famous example, it's always used for stress physiology, of a zebra in the wild facing off with a lion, right? The zebra sees there's this threat. The body goes through a huge, kind of cascade of hormones that are really all designed to prime that animal to fight or to flee and hopefully survive. So let's say the zebra manages to outrun the lion, and, this all takes place within a few minutes. So in the grand scheme of things, it's actually, that sort of whole stress cycle is actually pretty short. The animal goes back to, okay, I'm safe, goes back to that rest and digest mode, and the stress is really temporary. But what happens for us, because, we still have this adaptive stress response, but for us, the threats are not generally things we can fight or just run away from, right? So it's that chronic thing that shows up. And generally what happens is we don't ever really complete our stress cycle, and we don't give our body the signals that it needs to understand that we are safe, right? We stay seated at our desk day after day, right? Just kind of with our body is flooded with these stress hormones that really do impact every tissue in our body and start to really erode our health, over time. So I think that we often don't really bother to recognize or start to do anything about the stress in our lives, because as high achievers, we really don't recognize the value of recovery. And the reason for that is because we're running on a belief system that tells us that our value is our achievements. Okay, so our value is the results that we produce, and we're only as good as our latest result. And a prime example of this is a client I had over the past year who, she came to me, she was in, like, I'd say, like, the early to mid stages of burnout, just really exhausted and irritable and feeling very frustrated. She had recently been promoted to a GM role, and her and her team, they had all these sales targets to meet, but because of COVID and the industry that she's in, it was just totally stagnant. So there's nothing she can do. She can't really, meet these targets. And as we started working together, we discovered that she had really been using those results, right, her sales figures, because she had always been able to deliver, like, for this company over the years. And really that's, why she got promoted. So she was using, those sales figures as validation for, okay, like, I'm good at my job. And then that in turn allowed her to feel confident and motivated. And as soon as those sales figures disappeared and dried up on her, right now she has nothing, like, she can't get that validation that she needs. And so as a result, she has no basis for her confidence or her motivation. So she's tanking, and she's really, really starting to slip and slide at work because of that, right? So like many high achievers, she's really dependent on those external cues as a strategy to uphold a positive self-image. Okay, so the problem is it's external to her. So she's really dependent on people and things over which she has no control. And that leads to so much stress and anxiety, because we get really, really upset when we can't control our results. And then what we tend to do is we push harder and harder in an effort to regain that control, right? And that's exactly what happened with my client. And that's why she's now answering emails all weekend, signing up for trade shows and international travel, even though she actually had a 9-month-old baby at home, right? So all that stress and anxiety builds and builds and builds. And to get relief to cope, of course, she's turning to pizza and wine and the sugar pick-me-ups, right? Because, I think that this is really where we get stuck. I see it all the time. And then we just get used to a certain degree of struggle in our lives, right? And so now this client, she's just dog paddling, and there's really only so long she can go, right? Keeping her head above water like that. And the other thing too is that she is a leader of a team, and she's modeling these burnout strategies for her entire team. And of course, the whole team is also feeling burned out. So this was just, a really great opportunity for me to be able to highlight for her the breakdown in her mindset that was really preventing her from getting that need for validation met. And, I think that need, whether we're aware of it or not, it's a requisite need, and our brain is actually always trying to meet it for us, right? So when we're hooked up to external validation as a strategy, it's a really unsustainable pattern, right? Because as soon as we get those extra challenges or that adversity in our life, well, now we can't control it, right? So we can't get what we need emotionally, and we're up, we're down, we're all over the place. It doesn't feel good. And I think when we're not able to get that validation in our lives, and that is really when we start to sink into those feelings of like personal deficiency. And a lot of the research really shows actually that shame will trigger our amygdala, which is a part of our brain that's actually controls our stress response. Okay. And it will put us into fight or flight. So let's just contrast this. I'm trying to be aware of time here. I think I'm going to have to skip part here. We really want to finish at 1 o'clock. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So let's just go right to the mindset of a high performer then is really that believes that their value is their potential, which always exists inside of them. And because of that, and that potential can always be realized through their growth, right? So that really sets them up for feeling good enough internally and having strategies really where you can self-validate that are in your control. And then, that's what really puts you at the helm in your experience, because now whatever's going on around you, you know how to kind of self-regulate and meet those core emotional needs. And as a result, you can calm your nervous system, right? So I had a whole other part here where I was really going to get into the whole other, belief that I see, which has to do with a lot of the perfectionism. And that was really my issue. And what I learned about was that when I did the coaching was that I had set the bar so high for myself, right? But as perfectionists, I think that's the thing that we have to realize here is that we don't know that we've set the bar too high. So we get trapped in this, right? And it's like, for me, it was so high that I even needed to be making the perfect banana bread, right? So I think that, the whole thing with a high performance mindset is really that it's all about, making progression the goal and not perfection. And if that's the goal, then we can really take ownership of that, because we can always show up and take ownership over our progression, right? And our growth. That is something that we can impact, and it feels a lot more doable, right? Than going for those, being driven by that standard of always meeting those perfect results. So I think, when we dig deeper, we really see the crash that's on the other side of the high achiever mindset. It's that mindset that really drives us to run down ourselves until, we have nothing left to give. And I think we need to see how unsustainable it is to be driven by, needing to get those perfect results or those, that external validation, because that's how and why we blow way past where we need to be in terms of that level of arousal, right, in our nervous system. And I think that this is really, where the opportunity lies for all of us, because no matter where we're leaders in terms of like our lanes in our own lives, right, we can always impact our mindset. And this was really, I think for me, like my bottoming out was kind of my biggest opportunity, because that's what I really learned was, how to start living my life with an understanding of what a realistic standard of excellence actually means, to also understand what it means to have boundaries around my time and my energy and my focus. And I think the biggest one is to understand that this way of doing things is actually really the key to sustainable performance, right, over the long term. So I would encourage everyone on this call, something that you can do is to Google, how to complete the stress cycle, because you're going to get, a nice handful of things that you can start doing right now today to just start being aware of that, right? That every day, try and, incorporate some of that into your life. And I think too, if anything on this call resonated, and maybe I'll just put it in the chat, I'm not sure how you want to handle this, but if it resonated and you want to know more, you can email me. We do actually have a Breaking Burnout course that we offer to teams, and we're willing to honor a discount today if there's somebody on the call today, wants to bring their team in, then just please email me. And should I put it in the chat, just what my email is?
I put it up.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. And I was going to say, we can always circulate some notes after the session if you feel comfortable doing so. I can send them to all the registrants.
Sure, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne. Really reinforced a lot of what we spoke about today, and gave us some tools to take away in action in our own lives. So very much appreciated. Thank you so much to all the panelists as well, and Claire for moderating the discussion. This brings our session to a close today. Thank you all for joining us again. I encourage you all to visit our website to learn more about nabs. We'll also post a recording of the session so that you can come back and revisit any of the key points that were made today. I expect that early next week. Also, stay tuned for more of these sessions in the new year on topics that we all care about, brought to you by the incredible members of the NABS Central Committee. So thank you all, and have a great day.